I'm 93 years old, and I've learned something most families will never say out loud. You may be loved deeply, but that doesn't mean you'll always be surrounded. Age has a way of slowly emptying the rooms you once filled with laughter, until one day the loudest sound in your house is the ticking clock in the hallway. I know that because I've lived it. My name is Richard Bennett. I raised 4 children, watched 10 grandchildren grow up, and buried the love of my life, Martha, in 2012. My closest friend, Frank Miller, passed away in 2018. For 30 years, Frank and I met every Friday morning at the same diner outside Omaha, Nebraska. We never missed a week until cancer took him. People ask me all the time, Richard, what's your secret? How are you still going? And I always tell them the same thing. There is no secret. There are only 3 pillars, and if you don't build them before you need them, you'll spend your final years waiting for people who are busy living lives of their own. I love my children. I truly do. Emily lives in Phoenix. Michael moved to Tennessee. Stephen retired in Florida. My oldest son, Daniel, Daniel and I haven't spoken in nearly a decade. That's a story for another time. The point isn't that my family abandoned me. They didn't. Life simply kept moving, and eventually I learned something painful. Love and presence are not always the same thing. People can love you and still be unable to show up. That's why the first pillar, the one nobody likes talking about, is routine. Not hobbies, not distractions, routine. Because after 75, your days either have structure or they collapse under their own weight. I learned that lesson from a man named Thomas Reed. Tom lived down the street from me in Lincoln, Nebraska. He retired from General Motors after 38 years. Everybody celebrated him. There was barbecue, cake, speeches, and enough laughter to fill the whole neighborhood. 6 months later, he was sleeping until noon. A year later, he had stopped shaving. By the 3rd year, he spent most afternoons in a recliner with daytime television running in the background. His wife, Nancy, still had church friends and volunteer work. Tom had memories, that's all. He passed away at 76, and no doctor ever convinced me that loneliness wasn't part of what killed him. After Martha died, I sat alone in my kitchen and realized I was standing at the edge of the same cliff. So I built a schedule: 5:30 wake up, coffee at 5:45, morning walk at 6:15, breakfast at 7, reading by 8, errands before noon, dinner at 5, lights out at 9. Nothing glamorous, but structure saved me, because empty days are dangerous. And routine became my first pillar. But routine alone isn't enough. I discovered that because of a woman named Helen Carter. Helen was probably the smartest person I ever knew. She taught history at Jefferson Middle School for 32 years. Students adored her. Former graduates stopped her in grocery stores. Parents wrote letters thanking her. When she retired at 68, everybody said she'd earned a peaceful life. And for a while, she seemed happy. She traveled, read books, spent afternoons gardening. But around 78, something changed. Not her health, her purpose. You see, Helen had stopped being needed. Nobody depended on her anymore. No students, no deadlines, no goals. And little by little, she began asking a question that terrified me. Why am I still here? At first, she said it jokingly. Then she said it seriously. And that's when I understood something I wish somebody had taught me when I was younger. Human beings don't just need things to do. They need reasons to wake up. Purpose isn't about money. It isn't about careers. It's about usefulness. Helen eventually started tutoring children at the local library, 3 afternoons a week, nothing fancy, just helping kids learn to read. And I watched something remarkable happen. The spark returned. Her eyes brightened again. She laughed more, walked taller, because someone needed her. And that's when I discovered the second pillar, purpose, not success. Purpose. Without it, even healthy people begin to disappear while they're still alive. But the third pillar took me the longest to understand, because I thought I had it figured out. I thought family was enough. I thought blood guaranteed connection. Then came the Christmas of 2017, and that's when my oldest son, Daniel, and I stopped speaking. I've had 9 years to think about that silence. And if there's one thing age teaches you, it's this. Relationships are like gardens. Ignore them long enough, and weeds don't ask permission. They simply grow. Daniel and I had argued before. Nothing unusual. But pride is a stubborn thing, especially between fathers and sons. One angry phone call became 6 months of silence. 6 months became 2 years. And before either of us realized it, we had lost nearly a decade. Not because we hated each other, because neither one of us wanted to make the first call. And pride, I've learned, is one of the loneliest companions a man can have. I missed birthdays. He missed anniversaries. Years vanished. And every time I thought about picking up the phone, I told myself, next week. But life has a cruel habit. It keeps moving while we keep postponing. And one afternoon, sitting alone in my living room, I asked myself a question that changed me. Richard, how many tomorrows are you honestly counting on? Because at 92, you stop measuring life in decades. You measure it in seasons. And suddenly, being right doesn't seem nearly as important as being together. Grace Henderson was the kind of woman people remembered. Always elegant, always composed. At 80 years old, she still put on lipstick before taking out the trash and wore a silver bracelet she'd owned since 1965. That's just who Grace was. She believed dignity wasn't something you lost with age unless you gave it away. Her husband died in 1989 and left very little behind. She raised 2 sons on a librarian's salary, stretching every dollar until it practically begged for mercy. Not because she was irresponsible, because she was a mother. There were school clothes to buy, soccer fees, college tuition, used cars, emergency room visits. Every penny she had went into building their futures, and she never regretted it. But there was one thing nobody ever warned her about. Dependence changes relationships. Not overnight, not maliciously, just slowly. When your children begin paying your bills, they don't mean to take over your life. But eventually, money starts bringing opinions with it. Mom, maybe you don't need that car anymore. Mom, this house is too big. Mom, have you thought about moving closer to us? At first, it sounds like concern, and maybe it is. But concern has a strange habit of turning into control. Grace turned 79 and needed major plumbing repairs. Her younger son, Brian, an attorney living outside Denver, paid for everything, and something changed after that. Suddenly, he wanted to know how much she spent each month, why she kept certain subscriptions, why she insisted on living alone. He wasn't cruel. He loved her. But love and authority are 2 very different things. Within 3 years, Grace was living in a retirement community she never really wanted. Nice place, beautiful grounds, friendly staff, but it wasn't her home. I visited her one afternoon and found her sitting by the window with a blanket over her lap. No bracelet, no lipstick, no spark. I asked where the bracelet was. She smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile I remembered. Then she said something I have never forgotten. "Richard, I don't know who I'd be dressing up for anymore." And I swear to you, something inside me cracked. Because independence isn't about pride. It's about identity. You can take away a person's keys, their house, their routines, and they'll survive. But take away the feeling that their life still belongs to them, and something deeper begins to fade. That's when I realized the second pillar, financial independence. Not wealth, not luxury, just enough. Enough to choose, enough to say yes, enough to say no. I worked as a maintenance supervisor for Westinghouse for 39 years. I saved because I had watched too many people surrender choices they didn't mean to surrender. People aren't bad. They're busy, and busy people solve problems. Sometimes they solve you. Protect what you've built, even if it isn't much, because modest and free is worth more than comfortable and controlled. But the third pillar, the third one nearly broke me, because understanding it meant admitting something I'd spent years avoiding. I discovered it at 83, 2:30 in the morning. Couldn't sleep. I sat in this same kitchen staring at an old photograph from June of 1960. Helen and I on our wedding day, St. Mark's Church in Lincoln. I looked at that young man smiling in the picture, and for the first time in my life I realized I didn't know the man sitting in the chair. I knew Helen's husband. I knew Emily and Stephen's father. I knew the man who spent 40 years punching a clock. But Richard, just Richard, I wasn't sure I knew him at all. And that frightened me, because eventually life strips away your titles. Husband, employee, dad, grandfather. One day all those labels grow quieter, and what's left is the person underneath. The third pillar is your relationship with yourself. I know, sounds strange, maybe even selfish, but hear me out, because this is where I need to tell you about Daniel, my oldest son. People assume we stop speaking because of some terrible argument. The truth is far more ordinary. After Helen passed, Daniel begged me to move in with his family. He meant well. He really did. He said, "Dad, you're 83. You shouldn't be living by yourself." And I said, "Son, I'm not by myself. I'm with myself. And I need to find out if that's enough." He didn't understand. Maybe I wouldn't have either at his age. He thought I was rejecting him. Thought I was choosing solitude over family. Maybe he was hurt. Maybe I handled it poorly. I still don't know. But I knew one thing. If I surrendered my days completely, I'd stop being myself. I'd become a guest in somebody else's life. And I wasn't ready for that. So I stayed. And the price of staying was distance between me and my son. That's the hard truth about this third pillar. Sometimes choosing yourself disappoints people. When you're young, you never have to meet yourself. There's always noise, jobs, marriage, children, neighbors, deadlines. Life keeps you busy. Then one day the house grows quiet. The chair's empty. Helen's chair, Frank's chair, my brother George's chair. And suddenly you're face to face with the one person who remained, you. If you don't know that person, if you don't like that person, those quiet nights become unbearable. I've seen men survive combat and lose themselves after retirement, not because they lack courage, because they never learned to sit peacefully with their own thoughts. These days, I talk to myself, yes, out loud, every morning. "Good morning, Richard." Some folks would laugh. I don't care. Some mornings I'm the first kindness I'll receive all day. I read books and form my own opinions. Not Helen's, not the preacher's, mine. I sit on the porch and watch children ride bicycles. And I've learned not to reach for the phone every time silence visits, because silence isn't always loneliness. Sometimes it's simply life asking if you're comfortable with your own company. And after burying nearly everyone I loved, I've discovered something important. The loneliest people aren't always the ones who live alone. They're the ones who built their peace on other people. Because people leave, not always by choice, not always forever, but they leave. Children grow up, friends move away, health changes, life happens. And if your happiness depends entirely on somebody else's presence, eventually you'll find yourself bankrupt in ways money can't fix. So build your routine, protect your independence, and learn your own name again. Not the one written on Father's Day cards, not grandpa, not husband, the name underneath all those titles. Because that person is the one you'll spend the most time with. Last Thursday, Stephen called and said he and his daughter Chloe might visit this summer. She's 21 now. The last time I saw her, she still carried stuffed animals everywhere. I don't know what music she listens to. I don't know what dreams she has. But when she walks through my front door, she won't find a man waiting to be saved. She'll find a man who's been living. Daniel still hasn't called. Maybe someday he will. Maybe he won't. At my age, you stop demanding answers. You just leave the porch light on. And tomorrow morning at 5:30, I'll sit in this same kitchen with the same coffee mug in my hand. I'll smile and I'll say good morning to the one person who's been here through every chapter. And if someone decides to knock on the door, there will always be an empty chair waiting for them.